One of the things that has been in the news, obviously, in Maine the most in the last couple of weeks has been the sort of civil unrest you're starting to see, not only the protests, but also the defiance of the emergency orders, like with what you saw with Rick Savage and the Sunday River Brewing Company. Is it lawful to imprison or penalize, frankly, someone who defies an emergency order like he was doing? What recourse do people like Rick Savage have in opening their businesses in defiance of this order? Is that something that you might even recommend or caution against? Can the state permanently rescind their licensing status as a result of this? What are these implications?
I mean, in that particular example, I think that the biggest leverage that the state had was the liquor licensing, which is rather, the state has a lot of power to impose restrictions on your ability to sell alcoholic beverages, as opposed to just your general ability to open an ordinary business. The more highly regulated the business you are, the more likely it is that there's going to be some regulatory provision that can independently serve the basis as part of the bargain of doing business, because you're going to comply with all state laws, you're going to comply with all duly posted orders, either from the agency or in this case from the governor. And that's going to be a leverage point that they're going to have on you, and that's going to make it more difficult for you to charge. I mean, the thing about civil disobedience is it is disobedience. There's a law and there's a rule, and you are violating it, and you are accepting the consequences that come with violating it. Now, the scope of the economic damage to this state is not to be understated, and in particular, a state that depends on tourism and that depends on people from out of state coming in here heavily during the summertime for a lot of reasons, and that is what puts a lot of money into this economy that in turn helps pay for all the service providers, all the contractors, all the residents who live here who need other services. Maine, I think, was justifiably identified as one of the most financially vulnerable states, and these people need to be ringing the legislature and the governor's phones off the hook. And I think some unrest and some protest is going to have an effect, because I think that people are ultimately going to have to enact, because we've made it clear, we think that the democratic process is really the only outlet for challenging a lot of these laws. But the answer is more people may do that, and I think there are some enforcement issues with respect to particular individuals or folks, but there are be to pay for doing that. And my guess is that as a matter of law, any responsible lawyer would advise people, say, yes, you're going to risk some liability or even potentially criminal penalties if you disobey these orders.
Well, the related issue that was raised in one of the comments is liability. And of course, I actually had one of the last burgers at that restaurant up in Bethel before they closed the ski areas, and a donut. And so looking forward to going back as soon as possible. But, there's a liability question. If he's going to, if you're going to open your business and let's say there is someone sick from Boston that comes up and for a burger, and now you've got 10 people who ate there and spent an hour in the restaurant and potentially are ill. I mean, I wouldn't have high hopes that he would be able to save that business under those circumstances. And I'm not sure he could even get insurance for that loss because all the insurance policies have virus exclusions. So, I mean, it is a very risky proposition, both, will the state ultimately be successful in imposing whatever sanctions it imposes, but also from a liability standpoint. I mean, he's not going to be handing out waivers to people in line. I didn't see that on TV, and asking them to agree. Well, if you should happen to get ill, you're not going to sue. I don't know that that'd be enforceable anyway.
And if that person, having disregarded Patrick's advice and then disregarded Sig's advice, then came to me and said, should I open? After repeating what you just heard from Patrick and Sig, one of the things I would drive home is, if you're going to do that, you need to do it in a way where you're meeting the social distancing criteria that's out there, if for no other reason than to be able to show Augusta that in fact this type of business can do this and reopen and be safe. But if you end up defying the orders and then have mass gatherings with people in close proximity, frankly, you're just hurting the cause somewhat down the line.